Welcome into One of One Sports. It's time for another college football record prediction video with today's team being the Miami Hurricanes. So last year I was super high on the Miami Hurricanes. I picked them to be the number one seed at the going into the college football playoff. I picked Cam Ward to win the Heisman. And look, for a while I thought I was on pace, but obviously it unfolded pretty poorly at the end of the season. They're getting two losses in their final three, and Miami went on to finish 10-3 with a bowl loss to Iowa State. Now, this was kind of a disappointing end to the well, definitely a disappointing end of the season, but it made it hard to grasp how the season went as a whole. Because on one end, 10-2 with a Cam Ward being as good as he was, the best offense in college football, there was a lot of positives. But with the way you blew the Syracuse game and lost to Georgia Tech again, and there were some coaching errors by Mario Cristobal down the stretch, and the defense was just horrific and kind of wasted what was maybe not historically good offense, but pretty close to that. It made it really a mixed bag in terms of how to evaluate the season. Now, what you lost was a lot coming into this next season. You lost arguably the biggest loss anyone had, as he was the number one pick in the NFL draft. Cam Ward at quarterback. He had the most touchdowns passes in the history of college football. He was awesome. And look, we're going to talk about who you're bringing in Carson Beck in a minute, but it's going to be hard for anyone to fill the shoes of Cam Ward. You also lose all your top six receivers in terms of yardage, most importantly, Xavier Restrepo, who's one of the best receivers Miami has had in a long time. So you're completely depleting your receiver core. You lose two starting linemen. You lose your best running back in Damian Martinez as well. And then on the defensive side, you're going to lose your top tackler at linebacker, your two of your three sacks leaders, your interception leader. In terms of special team, you lost Borregales, who's one of the best kickers in the country. So there is a ton that Miami is losing from what was overall a pretty good team. But you also bring in a bunch to replace that. You're adding, if we start on the offensive side of the ball, Carson Beck is the biggest addition here at quarterback from Georgia. Now, coming in to last season, he had hype, and a lot of people were projecting him as the number one pick. I never really personally bought into that much, but I did think he was going to have a better season than what he ended up having at Georgia. He then gets hurt right in the SEC championship game, thinks about going to the draft, withdraws, transfers to Miami. You paid him, I want to say the report was like $5 million around there to go to Miami. I could be wrong on that part, but I think that's what it was. And the potential is obviously there. He's a really strong arm guy, but he's not mobile at all. He's different than Cam Ward, definitely not as dynamic, a pocket passer. And I think as we go through this, we're going to see, instead of asking him to be like Superman, like what people were expecting for him to be in his second year at Georgia, instead he's going to be more of a game manager type of quarterback. And be in a better spot than he was last year at Georgia, partly because I think he will have better receivers. You bring in Keelan Marion, an All-American from BYU, for special teams, but he's still dynamic as a receiver. You bring in CJ Daniels from LSU, Tony Johnson from Cincinnati, and then I think Trader and Lofton are two guys already on the team who could break out at receiver and tight end. Now, even though this isn't going to be as good as your receiving core last year, and definitely isn't the best receiver core in the ACC, that belongs to Clemson. And look, it may not be top three, but it's still, I think, a top five-ish core in the ACC. And when you look at what Carson Beck was dealing with last year at Georgia with the most drops in the country, pretty much anything is an upgrade. And I do think Miami's receiving core is going to be better than what he had last year. Additionally, to help out Beck, I think you'll have one of the better O-line groups in the country. We'll talk about it more in a moment, but what you brought in there, most importantly, was James Brockemeyer at center from TCU. He should be a good addition. You overhauled your secondary, bringing in six defensive back transfers. You brought in two linebackers, two tight ends, a running back. In the D-line, you brought in David Blay, maybe your highest profile defensive transfer from Louisiana Tech. He should have an instant impact. And you brought in Burt Auburn, a kicker from Texas, to help replace Borregales. Then in the recruiting class, you had the best recruiting class in the ACC. I think it was just outside the top 10. And the highlight of the recruiting class is Hayden Lowe, an edge rusher, 4 or 5-star recruit, depending on where you look at it. You also added a new defensive coordinator in Corey Heatherman from Minnesota. He led Minnesota to a top 10 defense in terms of scoring last year. And Miami, we all know they need some serious changes defensively. They hope he's going to do that for them. I do like the hire. I think he's a good defensive coordinator. And I do think at least maybe it won't happen right away week one, but I do think we will see improvements from him and this hire. And then in terms of what you're returning, the first thing I want to talk about is the freshmen that are becoming sophomores, because Miami had the number 4 recruiting class in the country last cycle. And then guys like Justin Scott, 5-star defensive lineman. Armando Blunt, 5-star defensive lineman. Marquise Lightfoot, 4 or 5-star, depending on where you look, all on the defensive front. To add to a Ruben Bain, who has potential to be like a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, lead the ACC in sacks, that level of player. The D line has all the talent to be amongst the best in college football. You also bring in return Trader and Lofton, like I talked about, who I think could be breakout players in the receiving game. You return OJ Frederick at DB, freshman All-American. You return Francis Mauigoa, who has potential to be top 5 pick in the NFL draft, is maybe the best O lineman in the sport. And you return Mark Fletcher to the run game, which is good because you lost Damian Martinez. So overall, when evaluating this is an extremely talented roster, but it is completely new. There's so many things that'll have to gel, from the O-line to the secondary to the new receiver room, a new quarterback. There's all the talent to be maybe even a national title contending team, but it's really hard to judge just because there's so many new moving parts. Now, getting into the specific strengths and weaknesses of this team, I mean, we mentioned who's coming back, but breaking it down, I think this has the potential to be an elite offensive line when you bring in Tommy Brockmeyer and other transfers to go alongside Francis Mauigoa and your other returners. There's a lot of talent on this line, and it could be a dominant force. And I do think it's one of the most important parts of the team this year, because you don't have a Cam Ward or a Damian Martinez to make these dynamic plays, or an Xavier Restrepo. But if you give Carson Beck time in the pocket, and you give guys like Mark Fletcher and your running back by committee really good holes to run through, so that they're going to be a good running game, and have a quarterback who can pick apart a defense because he has time in the pocket, give receivers time to separate, you can be just as productive, or at least close to as productive of an offense as you were last year, by being more well-rounded just from having an elite offensive line, even if you don't have the dynamic players like you did last year. Then the pass rush. Ruben Bain, I know, is going to be awesome, but what can guys, like I mentioned, the upcoming sophomores do? What can David Blay do? How good is the interior of the D-line going to be at forcing pressure? Who's going to be opposite of Ruben Bain and step up? Because it has the potential. I know it'll be a good pass rush, but it has the potential to be among the best in the sport. Similar to the O-line, if you're wreaking pressure, that'll make your secondary look better. It'll help out your linebackers. So if you can have an elite unit on both sides of the trenches, then you're looking at a really high upside for this Miami team. And then overall talent, they're just going to have a talent edge pretty much every week in the ACC play, unless you play Clemson, which isn't on the schedule, or maybe in Florida State. Potentially, you're just going to have a talent edge every week in conference play. And then weaknesses, the secondary, like I said, there's a ton of talent. It's been overhauled, but there's so much newness that you don't know if it's going to immediately take the jump. And then, like I said, the receiver corps will be better than what Beck had at Georgia, but I don't know there's a true number one receiver like you had in Xavier Restrepo. So maybe lacks a little bit of dynamicism in the passing game. And then in-game coaching, for as much as I like Mario Cristobal as a recruiter, and as well as I think he has done in elevating Miami to like a new standard, I don't like the decisions he makes in games, and I think it has held Miami back at very least last year at the end of the season. So he needs to either get better at that, or I do think you lose a game you're not supposed to because you can't trust him in certain scenarios. Getting into the actual schedule here, we have one of the games I'm most looking forward to all college football season: renewal of Miami versus Notre Dame, Catholics versus convicts. Huge, huge game. And I think these teams actually have a lot of similarities going to the season. I think they're going to look to lean on a strong offensive line and a run game. For Notre Dame, you have what many are saying is the best running back room in the country, at least the best running back in Jeremiah Love, and then Price behind him. That should be really good, and you should have a really strong offensive line. We just talked about Miami's offensive line and how that could lead to a good ground game. And, Miami maybe doesn't have the receiver talent right away. You're breaking in new guys. Carson Beck's coming off injury. Are you going to be looked at throwing that much, especially against Notre Dame, who maybe has the best secondary that you'll see all year? Maybe not. And then on the Notre Dame side, even though Miami maybe has a secondary that you could target, and you have good receivers in Great House and Malachi Fields transferring in there, CJ Carr, who I expect to win the job, has never played before and is going to be on the road in this big of a game at night in a Sunday prime time. Are you going to want his first ever game? You're going to put the ball in his hands and hope he doesn't make a mistake? I don't know about that. So I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, kind of who doesn't make a mistake. And I was back and forth. I could easily see Notre Dame just being better in the trenches and neither team able to really do much through the air, and Notre Dame winning a low-scoring rock fight. But I also see another world where CJ Carr isn't quite ready week one and maybe makes a bad interception. And again, just keep going on with this. Like Carson Beck has also proven he can be interception prone in big games. Multiple, I think, was it 3 or 4 interception games last year, like 3 of them or something in some of the biggest games. And Notre Dame was great at forcing turnovers that won't necessarily carry over. But there's so many different ways I could see this game going. And I was really, truly 50-50. I'm just slightly going with Miami here. And like I said, I think it's going to be low scoring. I'm talking like 17-14. I don't think Beck or Carr will play particularly well. I think both teams will have a focus on stopping the running game and the quarterbacks, and will just trust their secondary against quarterbacks who are either, even if you're experienced in Beck, you're coming off an injury, not fully 100%, or at least what you can be. And then Carr, nervous first game, won't be what he'll be by the end of the year. And I'm just barely going with Miami to win. I think they have better special teams. I think they have home field, and it could go either way, but I'm going with the Canes. And then I think you get 2 easy wins against Bethune-Cookman and USF. Not much to say there. Then another huge out of conference game at home before your bye week, and you're going up against a team in Florida that has maybe the best quarterback. At least DJ Lagway, I think, has the potential to be the best quarterback you'll see all season. And you have the receivers in Dallas Wilson and Eugene Wilson and Michael Sturdivant to challenge a Miami secondary. Florida also has an O-line capable of handling Miami's pass rush, and that'll be an interesting matchup to see if Ruben Bain and these other talented guys can do much against Florida O-line that many expect to be a top 5 to 10 O-line in the country. I'm not as sold on Florida as everyone else is this year, and I am going to pick Miami to win. I think Carson Beck by week 4 will start looking more like himself. I think the secondary will be getting better and ready to challenge these Florida receivers. And I also think that Lagway, while very talented, I don't think he's immediately like week 4 going to be one of the best quarterbacks. I think he'll have all the flashes. He'll hit some deep throws, but I think he'll still make some mistakes. Maybe stay in the pocket too long, maybe force a throw he's overconfident in. And I think Miami can make enough plays to get the win here. Start off 4-0 already with 2 huge wins going into the bye. You then come off the bye to face another rivalry already. 3 rivalries if you're counting Notre Dame, which I would, and Florida State, though you're going on the road and it's a rivalry, and I suppose, something kind of like anything can happen. I'm definitely out on Florida State after last year. Like, I don't think they'll be that bad, like 2-10 or whatever, but I'm not picking them to beat Miami. I think Miami's going to be more talented, have the better quarterback, the better O-line, the better D-line. I think maybe even better receivers, could have a better secondary. Like, I just don't see the advantage for Florida State in this game. You then get another bye. Not great scheduling here. Right? You don't want byes that close together, because now this last stretch you're going to have to play, 7 straight games with no rest, which is unfortunate. And I do think it starts off fine. You'll be like a well-rested team at home against Louisville, and better rested than Louisville for sure. And I do think you're the better team here. And Louisville, I don't think defensively has like the guys to match up with Miami's O-line, and I think it could lead to Miami putting up a lot of points. Stanford's not going to be very good. You should win that at home. And then you get a tough game going against SMU. I think this one's going to be really close. You're on the road. Kevin Jennings, I think, can be pretty good against Miami. And you have some receiving options like a Jordan Hudson and RJ Maryland, Romelo Brinson, Rhett Lashley going up against Miami after being the OC there. Some bad blood, and SMU has a ton of Miami transfers on the team. I think Miami's going to be looking to prove a point to them. The guys like Romelo Brinson, like Chaney, I think it's Chaney is his name. Sorry if I'm getting that wrong. But all the guys that left to SMU, I think Miami players still on the team are going to look to prove a point. I think Mario Cristobal beats his former OC, and then has 2 somewhat easy games against Syracuse and NC State, who I don't think are going to be particularly good teams this year. And now I have Miami at 10-0 going into a final 2-game road stretch. And this is where I think you get tripped up. Virginia Tech, going to feel like they were robbed last year. They're still experienced. Kyron Drones is back. You've been playing now 5 weeks straight. You're going on the road to Blacksburg, which is going to be a really tough place to play. And you've already picked you against Notre Dame, Florida, and SMU, 3 games that I could have gone the other way on. And now Virginia Tech being a 4th, I got to pick the loss there. And then Pitt was another tough one because you don't like back-to-back road trips, but I do think you can respond from the loss to get the win and finish 11-1. So this is a pretty generous prediction by me. The second straight year, actually, it's the third straight, the second straight on YouTube that I've been really, really high on Miami. And look, I think 10-2 would have been a slightly more reasonable prediction. It is pretty ambitious to think you'll beat Notre Dame and Florida, two really good teams. But I am high on this team, and I'm willing to go out on a limb here and predict Miami to finish 11-1. Let me know what you think about this prediction down in the comments below. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.